That's interesting, and I think that might even tie into actually the next thing we have coming up here, which is,
Thing
and I'm glad
that is
you're here, Mike. But apparently, according to Grant Cameron, I think this is the right clip. Ron Pandolfi might have briefed Trump, so maybe let's listen to this, and then you could tell us who Ron Pandolfi is and your thoughts on this, because I don't really know much about him, but he seems kind of like a boogeyman, but also some people love him. I don't know. Let's listen.
built into that aspect, and also Ron Pandolfi. What Ron Pandolfi does is he's had this conversation with this Dan Smith guy for 26 years, since 1991. And the way Dan describes it is Ron will be talking to me, and he's his best man at his second wedding, godfather to his child. He'll say, Ron will leak something. He'll just say it. He'll only say it one time. And either my radar is on and I pick it up or I don't pick it up. And he will not repeat it. And if anybody ever asks him, he'll deny it. And that's how it works. So he tells Dan Smith. Dan Smith puts it on his blog. Dan Smith tells me. So it's like the puppet master telling the puppet. And then the puppet tells me, and I'm a puppet. So I repeat the story and it gets out. And if you phone him up, like what happened with when the story was that he briefed Donald Trump and spent almost every day in December with Donald Trump. When that came out, Steve Bassett picked up on it. So Steve Bassett immediately phones Ron Pandolfi and says, Dan Smith said you briefed Donald Trump. Now, Dan Smith's lying. Never did. No, no. And it's plausible deniability. So it's all verbal. It's all, you can't prove anything. And
So yeah, according to Ron Pandolfi, he claims he briefed Trump. So Mike, I feel like you're on the panel, know the most about who is Ron Pandolfi, and do you think he actually briefed Trump? And doesn't it tie in kind of to the Deep Prasad and Amy Eskridge thing?
Yeah, so I can tell you, Deep Prasad did tell me he had been reached out to by Ron Pandolfi also many years ago. And I wonder if Deep will ever feel comfortable talking about that one day. That'd be pretty interesting to hear.
But yeah, who is he first, though? Who is Ron Pandolfi?
Ron is a longtime CIA employee. He was one of the head scientist guys over at the CIA.
He ran the Weird Desk, didn't he? Over there for a little bit.
Had run the CIA Weird Desk now, is taking over for like Kit Green. But I don't he doesn't really admit that role. But yeah, that would be his, like, he's the CIA Weird Desk guy. But more importantly, he had busted China on stealing, I think, secrets from the U.S. The U.S. was leaking secrets on our rockets to China, and I think he had been involved in trying to blow the whistle on this activity. And I think he got reprimanded a little bit for it, as I recall, was the story. But yeah, now he runs around and he does quite a bit of getting involved with people who are looking for alternative means of propulsion, right? Like alternative energy sources. And you'll find him very frequently involved in some very unorthodox projects.
Is it safe to say like he's kind of his own camp, right? Because I've noticed that I feel like a lot of the Lou crew people really don't like this guy. But I feel like other people, kind of like Grant Cameron here, kind of give him credence and props and kind of view him as like a good guy. Have you ever heard that?
As Grant Cameron would say, he carries around the keys to the UFOs topic. And if Ron Pandolfi doesn't like what you're doing, he can shut you down. That was what they said. And Ron Pandolfi was one of the people who rumored to have helped shut down the remote viewing program once and for all, right? We read about in Lou Elizondo's book, remember? He talks about, almost joining the remote viewing program and then it got killed.
Yeah.
I would venture to say it's very possible Ron Pandolfi was part of the people who killed that program, may have known that Lou Elizondo was going into it, and has known for a long time that, Lou, he does not like him also.
I will add this too about Ron Pandolfi. I've had a few people reach out to me and they suspect that I'm in contact with Ron Pandolfi because I guess on some things we have similar talking points. One of them being that, like, a lot of the disclosure pushers, not a lot of them, but some of them seem to be low-key Scientologists and act and harass people like Scientologists. And apparently that's one of his talking points. So I didn't even know that. I've never talked to the guy. I kind of really want to, especially after I heard that, because, I've been on my harassment beat. But I just think that's another interesting data point. He's kind of this mythical figure, mystic, kind of in the shadows. People hype him up all the time. Definitely involved, right? Wasn't he also part of, like, the Aviary or something like that, too, with, like, Doty and...
I'm pretty sure Pelican.
Yeah.
That's his aviary name, I think.
Well, I'll say this too. I mean, if he really did brief Trump, well, then Trump's more interested and got some more knowledge than even UFOs. I mean, Pandolfi's really big into portals, and I mean, he talked about how his wife is, I think, supposedly like a hybrid, and there's a lot that the rabbit hole goes deep with Pandolfi. So it'd be interesting to know if he really did talk to Trump about it.
Yeah. So what do you think then, Mike? On that, you think we know who Pandolfi is? You think he briefed Trump, and what do you think he would brief Trump? Like, what angle would he try and brief Trump? You think?
I would think he would be tasked to brief Trump in whatever way the CIA wanted to, and the idea that he was spending every day with Trump talking about this seems pretty far fetched, and I wouldn't believe that.
Okay. Okay. How about you, Dr. Mounts? You ever heard of Ron Pandolfi, or any thoughts on this guy?
Yeah, I just had a couple thoughts. I mean, one, the obvious thing that he could be briefing him on is sort of a Robert Bigelow type situation, right? Like we never know how many ulterior motives are at play in these sorts of things, and it could be something as simple as, "Hey, this is the man who could garner us some funding for something right here." So that's my first thought, and then my second thought here, I see Pandolfi has been involved with intelligence operations related to China. And I mean, clearly, when we're talking about these briefings and these sorts of things, just like I saw today, hey, our military doesn't seem to have any grasp over these mysterious drones or objects flying over our bases, right? But speculation is they're Chinese or Russian. But if Pandolfi does have intelligence operations related to China, then obviously this is a national security issue. And we know that there's certainly major factors involving China at play anytime we're talking about the UFO topic or drones or national security. So I think, one of those two things could definitely be at play here.
Yeah, and something else that might as well just throw in, right? Because his name kind of resurfaced again recently. Well, a few reasons. People kind of suspected, I think Mike might have even at a time, because Pasolka kind of was beefing with some of the Disclosure Bros, and I think some people thought maybe she had Ron Pandolfi in her ear. But also recently, I don't know if you've seen this, and I think all things you probably followed this closer because I think you're kind of following the Ashton stuff a little closer. But I think like for whatever reason, Ashton Forbes is now beefing with Jack Sarfati, right? And it seems like Ashton Forbes is attributing some of Sarfati's takes, I guess, to Ron Pandolfi. I don't know if you guys have picked up on this recently, but there seems to be a little bit of like a Sal Pais versus Ron Pandolfi battle going on with like Ashton Forbes and Jack
Cage
Sarfati.
match.
Yeah, it's weird, but Ashton Forbes is like convinced that Ron Pandolfi is kind of like a POS CIA spook that just kind of does a bunch of horrible stuff. So, I mean, worth noting.
Yeah, does that have anything to do with the pursuit of anti-gravity technologies or, this notion of free energy or anything like that?
Yeah, I think so. I think for sure their beef was because it was all about like Sal Pais's patents, and if Jack Sarfati thinks that's like true science or whatnot. So yeah, that's where that one is. What did we got?